in Lekutei Sichos Chelik Hey, at the end of the second Sicha to Parshas Vayetze, which was the Likud that came out in the year of Tovshin Lamed and later was put into the Sefer Chelik Hey, there the Rebbe talks about the importance of Miftzah Tefillin. And then the Rebbe finishes off the Sicha by saying that this, meaning Miftzah Tefillin, will also be a hachana to the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, that after he will come, and only through him, and the Rebbe underlines the word him, there will be the Ketz HaGolus, the end of Golus, and only after that, as the Rambam says, is very clear, will start the Aschalta de Gula, the beginning of the Gula, in other words, not before, and only after that will be the Gula Amitis Vashlema, the real and complete Gula, and only after that, and only through Mashiach, will there be Kibbutz Golias, the Kodev Mamish Bagolu the Dan, the gathering of the Golias. But not before that. This is the order, and it's based on the Rambam. And here you have Ha'orah 51, a long Ha'orah, it's almost a full page, where the Rebbe goes into the details that this is the order, the way it's supposed to be when Mashiach will come, the way it's going to be, and trying to describe that what's going on in Eretz Yisrael now cannot at all be considered as Aschalta de Gula, as the beginning of the Gula. And the Rebbe goes into a lot of details here, explaining how it's not Aschalta de Gula at all. Like the Rebbe said in the Pnim, that the Aschalta de Gula will only come after Mashiach is here, and then is the Ketz HaGolus, and then we'll start the Aschalta de Gula, and then we'll go the Gula Amitas Hashlema, and then will be Kibbutz Golias. So what's happening now, that even though a lot of Yidden are coming to Eretz Yisrael, and we have whatever we have in Eretz Yisrael, it's not Aschalta de Gula at all. And the Rebbe in the Ha'orah explains it at length. Now one might ask, what's it doing in the Sicha? Why is this long Ha'orah here in the Sicha, when the whole Sicha has nothing to do with this? So let me explain it. A lot of times, the people who wrote the Sicha prepare for the Rebbe to be Magia, if there was a certain thing mentioned in the Sicha, that the Rebbe had written this about this inyan someplace else, they would put it in. It should become as a Ha'orah. Because then, it's not a Ha'orah only because it's a side thing, but since he mentions it, they would put it in the Ha'orah. Now, in this inyan, that this is Dafke, the Seder of the Geula, and before that is not Kibbutz Golias, there's a long letter from the Rebbe to Harav Zevin, explaining to him how what's happening in Eretz Yisrael now is not at all, not even Aschalta de Gula, it's not at all connected to the Gula. Since that was a letter that was written, and we had the letter, so it was... The point was, and here the Rebbe mentions the difference, the Seder of the Gula, it's Kedai to make a Ha'orah, which is the Rebbe wrote it anyway, so it's not a big job, because there is a letter already written, and it was put in when the Sicha was given into the Rebbe as a Ha'orah to what it says in the Pnim concerning the Seder of coming to Mashiach. Even though it's a side matter, but why not put it in? When the Rebbe was Magia the Sicha, he was Magia this Ha'orah also. And what he really did, he changed the whole letter, he Kimat almost, I might say, rewrote the whole Ha'orah with new words, and he made it even sharper the way it was in the original letter written to Rav Zevin, added so many things, and made it much sharper and much clearer that what's going on now is not Kibbutz Golias, and it's not the Aschalta de Gula at all. And then when the Sicha was put into the Sefer, it became part of the Sefer of Lekutei Sichos, and it has this Ha'orah which was basically rewritten, even though the original one was written already by the Rebbe also to Rav Zevin, but this was rewritten almost completely. And if you look at it, you see how strong the Rebbe is against the inyan that was going on there should be considered Aschalta de Gula. My Zayder, Reb Zalman Vilenkin, who was the Rebbe's Malamed, but he was very, very much Mekusher to the Rebbe. So he told me that when he was in France, he once spoke to Harav Rubinstein. Harav Rubinstein was from the Rabbonim in France, from the Alta Rabbonim. And he was there also when the Rebbe was there, at the time when the Rebbe went to university in France, he was there. And he saw the Rebbe then. So he told Mazede like this, that I believe, even though he says he's not a maven on these things, but I believe that the time that the Rebbe did the most of his Avedas Hashem was during those years that he was in France then. He says the way he saw what the Rebbe was, he says, I think that was the time when he did the greatest, highest madrege of Avedas Hashem. And he said to him that he would be one of the first to send him a pidyon. If Rebbe would become Rebbe, he would be the first one to send him a kvittel, I think he said the Loshen. Because he saw the greatness of the Rebbe. Actually, in those years where superficially he was there and he went to the university, but he saw the way he davened and the way he behaved. He saw on him that this is a person that is in the highest Madrega of Avodas Hashem. He says that there it was more than any other place. At that time, his Avodas Hashem was the highest Madrega. My aunt, my mother's sister, Aleha Shalom, her name was Dina. She was married to Reb Meir Dubravsky, but they took the last name Vilenkin, which was her maiden name. She was the daughter of Zalman Vilenkin. For reasons when they left to Russia, they had to change for the papers, and therefore they called themselves Vilenkin. Anyway, she told me that once in the Yuds, the end of the Yuds, she woke up one day and she couldn't see on one eye. And she thought that this is just a passing thing, so she didn't take it seriously. But another day passed, another day passed, and she still can't see on the eye. Then came Shabbos, it was Shabbos Mevorchim, and the Rebbe verbringt Shabbos Mevorchim. So her husband, Reb Meir, went over to the Rebbe in the middle of the verbringen and told the Rebbe what happened. The Rebbe thought for a moment, and then he said to him like this, you'll find out later, it'll come out that a vein in the eye had busted, and everything will be fine. After Shabbos, went to a doctor, and the doctor checked her, and the doctor said the first words, he said to her like this, God did a miracle with you, because there was a vein in your eye that busted, and he said there are 3 veins, I don't know the exact detail, but there are 3 veins, and if any one of the other 2 would have busted instead of this one, then you couldn't fix it, and then you would be blind in that eye forever. But because it was this one that busted, so this is something that we could cure. And he gave her medicine, and after a while, she started seeing on her eye like she saw before. Our family lived in Cleveland, and there was a Meshulach that used to come to Cleveland every year, and my father knew him and used to be friendly with him. Once when my father was by the Rebbe, and he was in 770, he sees this guy there, and he wasn't a Lubavitcher. So he asks him, what are you doing here? Why are you here? So he says, I have to tell you, you guys don't know yourself the greatness of your Rebbe. And this is what he told him. He said his wife became very sick, and she was taken to the hospital, and the doctors checked her out, and they said, I don't know what it was, but the doctor said that she must have an operation. And even that operation is only like a specsveki. We're not even sure that it's going to work. And even if the operation is successful, but she probably will be sick all her life. So, but there's the only choice. There's nothing else they could do. So someone told him that he should go to ask the Rebbe. So he came to 770, he went into Rabbi Chadakov, and he tells Rabbi Chadakov that he must go in to see the Rebbe. So Rabbi Chadakov says, you can't go in. Obviously, he didn't make an appointment. You can't just go into Yechidus to the Rebbe. So I guess someone advised him that when the Rebbe comes in Mincha, goes out of Mincha, someplace he should stop the Rebbe middle of the way and ask the Rebbe what to do. And that's what he did. He waited, and when the Rebbe passed by, he stopped the Rebbe and he told the Rebbe what happened to Bekitzer, and he asked the Rebbe what he should do. So the Rebbe said to him, should not do the operation. So right away he ran to the hospital and he told them that he's not letting them do the operation. And the doctor started saying, you're crazy. It's the only thing that's possible to help. And even that's a suffix, but it's possible. Even his wife herself said that she wants he should do the operation because that's the only chance that she has to live. And that's a changespart. And he said, no, he's not letting the operation. The Pale Mamash did not do the operation. She was in hospital, she said, in the hospital for 3 months. And she started getting better. And she got better and better and better till she became completely healthy. And he used the Lashon, healthier than she was before. And he even said that used to be that I was the healthier one of the 2 of us. And after this Maisa, she became healthier than I am. So here you see the greatness of the Rebbe. And that's why he comes from time to time to 770. When the Chayzrim used to write into the Rebbe Shailas after a Fabrengen, the Rebbe would always answer on the same page that they wrote the Shailas. And he would even use in his answer some of the words of the Shailas Gufa. If there was not enough space on the page, the Rebbe would go continue in the back of the page. So once was interesting that there was a Shaila on the Fabrengen of Chof of Tovshin Chof Hei, and the Rebbe started answering the Shaila in the top of the page, 3rd line, and he made an arrow, which meant look at the back, and we looked at the back, and the back on top of the page was another 2 lines, which was the Hemshach to the Shaila. But on the front page, on the bottom of the page, the Rebbe started writing concerning something else. So the last line of the page, he wrote 2 words, and then he made an arrow again, which means that you have to turn over the page. So we turned over the page, and in the back of the page, on the bottom was a whole paragraph, about 6-7 lines, that was a continuation of what the Rebbe started writing in the front of the page. But when we started reading it, we couldn't understand. One line to the other didn't make any sense. So we didn't understand what was happening here. Till we realized that what the Rebbe did was, when he turned the page, he started writing the answer in the last and the bottom of the page. When that wasn't enough, he continued on top of that. That wasn't enough, he continued on top of that. That wasn't enough, he continued on top of that. So really, it was supposed to be read milmata l'mayla, from the bottom up, the bottom line, and the line on top, and the line on top. And afterwards, we realized that when the Rebbe made in the front of the page the arrow to turn the page, we didn't realize it l'chatchila because it's not so dark. He made an arrow, little pointing up, which meant to tell us that when you read the back, you read it from the bottom up. But l'chatchila, we didn't realize it. So when you look at the page and it says what it says there, you have to read it mata l'mayla, from the bottom line going up till the top. By the Fabrengen, sometimes the Rebbe would stop for a moment and ask something of the crowd. Mainly it was when he would ask Kasha San Rasha. So sometimes he would ask, what number Kasha are we holding? This happened really especially in one Fabrengen when the Rebbe spoke about the Rasha that talks about the Chov Dalet Matnois Kahuna, the 24 presents that the Kohen gets. So the Rebbe spoke of that Rasha in two Fabrenges, Parshas Koirach Tovshin Chov Zayin, and Parshas Chukas Tovshin Chov Zayin. And between the two, there were 24 kashas. The first one, I think there were 15 kashas, and then later the Rebbe in the second Fabrengen added more, and every time we say, no, now this is the 16th kasha, this is the 17th kasha. And in the middle, he stopped and asked somebody, I think it was Zalman Yafi, because sometimes he would ask him which number kasha we're holding, and he asked him, no, which kasha are we holding now? And there was a question, did he get it right or not? And the Rebbe went up all the way to 24 kashas. But in the middle, he asked, where are we holding? And he would point and say, no, what kasha are we holding? So I remember that once the Rebbe was talking, and it seemed that the Rebbe is going to ask something. He spoke about Mesichta Uktzin. Uktzin is the last Mesichta in Shas. It's the end of Seder Taris, and it's the last Mesichta in Shas. So when the Rebbe spoke about Uktzin, and he said that not too many people learn Mesichta Uktzin. And he said there are some people that don't even know what the word Uktzin means. And he looked around, and it actually looked as if he's going to point to somebody and say, no, do you know what word Uktzin means? And a lot of people actually put their head down. They were afraid the Rebbe would point. It looked that way, as if the Rebbe was going to point. Lepeil, he didn't. He continued. But it was behemshech to, it seemed that the Rebbe was looking at the people as if to say, people don't know, so let's see if you know. Lepeil, the Rebbe didn't ask anybody, but I just want to say the feeling people got is that sometimes the Rebbe would stop and ask, where are we holding, or something like that. They thought maybe he would ask what Uktzin is by a certain specific person. Now, just to be mashlim the inyan, what is Mesichta Uktzin? What does the word Uktzin means? Uktzin means those little pieces that connect a fruit to the tree, like you have in the esrog, you have on top, you have the pitum, on the other side you have the ukitz. So Uktzin is that part of the fruit. And this talks about dinim of tumah v'tare. We know that food could become tomei. It's called tumas eichlin. And when you touch any part of the fruit, the whole fruit becomes tomei, not only the place you touched. So there is a discussion when you have this ukitz by the fruit, is it really considered one with the peire, with the fruit? And therefore, if you touch the fruit, the whole fruit becomes tomei, including the ukitz? Or is it considered like a separate entity? And therefore, if you touch the fruit, the ukitz will not become tomei. Or if you touch the ukitz, the fruit will not become tomei. Or will it become, in which cases? Some cases yes, some cases not. And the beginning of the Mesichta Uktzin, the first Perek, talks about these inyonim. That's why it's called Uktzin. That's the meaning of the word Uktzin. But the Rebbe said that many people don't even know what the word means. And like I said, the people got a certain feeling that the Rebbe is looking and he might ask somebody. The Rebbe did not. Everyone knows that one of the most famous Fabrengens by the Rebbe was the Fabrengen of Purim Tovshin Chai. It was said, even though we don't know for sure, but this is what it was said, that the Rebbetzin said that in the house, by the Sudas Purim, the Rebbe drank a lot of mashke. And then by the Fabrengen, they saw the Rebbe drank a lot of mashke too. And there was a very long Fabrengen, And you could hear from the way the Rebbe is speaking, you could hear it in the tape. I wasn't there, but you could hear in the tape that it was because the Rebbe drank a lot of mashke. He spoke a lot to private people, said different things to private people throughout the whole Fabrengen. And in the second half of the Fabrengen, he spoke a lot of Divrei Torah, even though you could see he was under the influence of the mashke, but a lot of Divrei Torah and Chidushim and different Inyanim, even though it was hard for him to talk, but he said it, which fits to what the Shalos says. The Rebbe brings the Shalos in Likutei Sichos Chelik Lamed Aleph, page 180, which is in the Sicha concerning Kom Rabbe V'Shochta L'Reb Zera. And there the Rebbe brings the Shalos. The Shalos writes that we find that there are Gdoshim Ashaboretz, holy people on the land, that drink a lot by Sudas, and the kavanah there is because when they drink a lot, it makes them more happy, and then they could say better divrei Torah, kiflaim l'tishia, even better, because meteich simcha megala hachacham rozei haTorah. From simcha, the chacham reveals the secrets of the Torah, and he says, because it says nichnas yayin yotza sod. The Gemara says if wine comes in, the secrets come out, and he writes shayidei mishta hayayin yetzu divrei Torah nikra sod. Through drinking wine, through drinking a lot, divrei Torah comes out, which is called secret. So by the Rebbe, this is exactly what happened. But Rebbe Yael told me that on Shabbos afterwards, this Fabrengen was Thursday night, Shabbos afterwards, the Rebbe called him in, him and the Rebbe Rav Leibel Shapiro as the Chayzrim, and asked him about the Fabrengen. They say he also called in separately Rebbe Groner and asked him also about the Fabrengen, but this I don't know, but the Rebbe Yael told me that he was called in together with Rebbe Leibel Shapiro, and the Rebbe asked him to tell over what happened by the Fabrengen. And the Rebbe said to them, bis noch Maimer habe ich gehalten Kopf. Till after the Maimer, my mind was still working, which means I remember what went on. But from after the Maimer, I want to know what went on. Could you tell me what went on? And the Rebbe asked them details of what went on. And they told over the Rebbe some of the nekudas of the siches that the Rebbe said, which Rebbe himself said that he doesn't remember them. But the Rebbe asked them, and they gave over the nekudah of the siches. And then another thing that the Rebbe asked them that he wanted to really know, did they at the end of the Fabrengen sing the Alter Rebbe's Nigen? He said he didn't remember whether they sang or not. And they told him, yes, they did. And the Rebbe, the way he told me, asked them again to make sure that they're not saying it just, so to speak, to make the Rebbe not feel bad. But they told him, he asked them again, is it really that they sang? And the truth is they did sing. The Rebbe said to sing the Alter Rebbe's Nigen. So they did sing it. But the Rebbe wanted to make sure 100%. And here we see that even though at the time the Rebbe was after a lot of mashke, but the divrei Torah that came out from the Rebbe and the biurim that came out from the Rebbe are things that come out, and they might even be deeper, like the Shalos says, that nichnas yayin yotza sod, that the divrei Torah that comes out by these tzaddikim is even greater if they take the yayin, which is megala, as he says, the keach hasichli that is in the nefesh, and then they're able to be megala, the talumas chochmah, the hidden parts of the chochmah. And one of the yechidus that my father, Olav Sholem, was, the Rebbe asked him if the shul that he davens in Cleveland, there are Litvish people there too. And he said yes. So then the Rebbe asked him, does he speak there from time to time? So he says yes, a lot of times he speaks there, he gives drashas there in the shul. So the Rebbe asked him if the Litvish people also are there and listen. So he said yes. So the Rebbe asked him, does he say Yonim Chassidus? So he said sure. So the Rebbe said to him that you should know that if you feel that it's more chance that they're going to listen, if you don't mention that it's Chassidus, so you don't have to mention that it's Chassidus. You just say the Inyan Chassidus and don't mention it if you feel that that'll make it more that they will listen. And in Chaname, sometimes my father used to do that because he knew that if he won't say it, then they're going to listen more, and then they will get the gedanked idea of Chassidus that he was saying, and this is part of Afotzas Hamayonos Chutzo. I remember a Fabrengen in the early Chovs where something strange happened. The Rebbe told to sing the Nigen Mipikel 3 times. That means after the first Sicha, he said to sing the Nigen Mipikel. After the second Sicha, he said again to sing the Nigen Mipikel. And after the third Sicha. It was very strange because why would the Rebbe say to sing the same Nigen, especially this Nigen? Why dafke this Nigen? As Svardische Nigen. So why did he choose this Nigen to sing 3 times? Everyone understood that there must be some Himmelmeise, something going on. Afterwards, a while later, we heard that in Morocco, the king was trying to make some kind of gzeira or something, I don't know exactly what, and he had a minor operation, a minor surgery, and he died from that surgery, and his son took over, and he was much better. This is what I remember very vaguely. I don't remember when it was, and I don't remember the details. Whoever I asked, almost nobody remembers such a thing. The only one that said, sure, he remembers such a Farbrengen, but also didn't remember the details and just remembered it vaguely, but remembered the concept that there was a Farbrengen when the Rebbe said 3 times to sing Mipikeil, and that was Reb Shlomo Zarchi. But everyone else didn't remember. We did a little bit of research and we found out that Purim, Tovshin Lamed Chaf Aleph, the Rebbe said to sing the Nigim Mipikeil. And that we even have on video or on tape. Also, we found out that the Sunday before that, going back in the news of those days, in the news was that the king of Morocco was having a minor surgery, and he died from that surgery, even though it was a minor surgery. That's the facts we found out. Now, how that fits to what I'm saying, that this was something that happened on the Shabbos, in the Hanochas, we don't have it, I don't know, but I do remember pretty clearly, vaguely the details, but pretty clearly, that the Rebbe did this. He said 3 times to sing Mipikeil, and afterwards we saw that in Morocco, which is a Svardish Medina, where Svardish Yidden live, that something like this happened, that the king was going to do something bad, and he died from minor surgery. The fact that there's a king that died that year from minor surgery is recorded in history of that time. But not more. If somebody knows more details or could figure out maybe some things that I made a mistake and things like that, if you'd notify me, I would be thankful. Thank you. Harav Ephraim Yolis was the chief rabbi of Philadelphia, and he was in America even before the Frierdiker Rebbe came. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he came, was very much Makaref him. And the reason they say is because he helped the Frierdiker Rebbe in his work. Not like other people, even other Rabbanim, who opposed what the Frierdiker Rebbe did. But he was on the Frierdiker Rebbe's side and helped, and the Frierdiker Rebbe was very much Makaref him. Right after Yud Shvat, Tovshin Yud, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was Nistalik, not long after that, he wrote a letter to Anash, to be Niskasher to the Rebbe, that he knows the Rebbe, and he wrote made a diketei and made descriptions on the Rebbe. He used to come to the Rebbe every Chalamayit Pesach and Chalamayit Sukkos, and he said the reason is because it says you have to go to your Rebbe on Yontif. And Yontif itself, he didn't come because he had his shul, he was the Rav in Philadelphia, but Chalamayit would come and he would always, after davening, walk over to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would say some words with him and talk to him a little bit, and sometimes they would even go into the room together. He also would come before Shavuos, and he would come to davening, and then he would walk over to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would always make a siyum ha-mesichta soite that you learn during Sfira till Shavuos, and he make it for him. Sometimes he would even go into the Rebbe's room. He was so close, that the Rebbe was so much makar of him, that it was one night, which was the Vachnacht of a grandson of his. So he came to the Rebbe, it was Thursday night, Parshas Chayesora, the date was Chof Vov Cheshvan Tovshin Tezayin. He came to Yechidus of the Rebbe in honor of the Vachnach of his Einikl, of his grandson. And the Rebbe said a maimer especially for him then. And he came out in Chazer a maimer, it was written down. And later on, Tovshin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe was Magia this maimer, and it came out in the Kuntres for Chai Yud Ches Nisan Tovshin Nun Aleph, which was the beginning of the 90th year of the Rebbe's Bris, because the Rebbe's Bris was on Chai Nisan, and this was also the date of the Yom Haledes, of the birthday of the Rebbe's father. So for that date, the Rebbe was Magia. This Maimeret was said to Rav Yolis in Yechidus in Tovshin Tezayin, and it came out in that Kuntres. He also used to come from Philadelphia to all weekday Farbrengens, and he would sit on the bima of the Rebbe, and he would sit on a special chair that they put for him, and this was on the right hand of the Rebbe. But once something happened in connection to this seat that he had, and that I will tell in the next broadcast. As I said before, Rav Yolis from Philadelphia, was the chief rabbi of Philadelphia, would come to the Rebbe's Farbrengen every weekday Farbrengen. And he would sit on a chair on the bima that they would put on the Rebbe's right side. He also had this custom, it started at one point, that Ayutas Kislev, when the Rebbe would make the Chalukas Hashas, and everybody would have to write on a card which Mesichta they're taking. So the Rebbe would also write on the card which Mesichta is taking. And the Rebbe, I remember one Fabrengen in the beginning of the Chovs, I forget which year it was, one of the Yutas Kislev Fabrengen, the Rebbe needed a pen. So Rav Yolis was sitting not far, took out the pen from his pocket and gave it to the Rebbe. And from then on, every year, on Yutas Kislev, when the Rebbe needed a pen to fill out the card which Mesichta is taking, Rav Yolis would have ready a pen. And I think he would buy every year, that's what they said, every year a special gold pen just for this, and he would give it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would use it by Fabrengen, and they would give it back, and you'd have the pen. One year, the Vadam Sader decided that when they put his chair on the bime, on the right side of the Rebbe, and they put it pretty far away, so he shouldn't sit right next to the Rebbe. But what he used to do, he used to slowly, I don't know if it's bekavana, without kavana, but slowly he would get closer and closer. And they felt that he's getting too close. So what they did was to make sure that the chair cannot move. So one Fabrengen, they decided to tie the chair with chains to the table so it won't be able to move. He came to the Fabrengen, he sat down on the chair, and he tried to move it, and he saw it doesn't go. So he couldn't move it. He obviously wrote this to the Rebbe later, and the Rebbe sent out a zettel to the Vadam Sader. Who is the one that tied Rav Yolis' chair b'shalshaloya shel barzel, with chains made of metal, iron chains? Actually, the Loshen shalshaloya shel barzel, which is used in Chazal in different places, it's not such a positive term. It says when you go to jail, you go b'shalshaloya shel barzel. It says b'negei Yankev Hashem one. Really, he could have gone to Golos with Shal Shalor Shal Barza. Other places, it says the Loshen Shal Shalor Shal Barza, which is a negative term, like when you put someone in jail. So the Rebbe used the term here. Who is the one that tied the chair of Yolis with Shal Shalor Shal Barza with the metal chains? They answered the Rebbe, the Vadam Sader answered the Rebbe, that it wasn't one individual, it was a achlot, a decision of the whole Vad. They all take responsibility for it. The Rebbe answered that he wants to know exactly who is the one that actually put on the chains. So I think they answered again, if I remember correctly, that it's not an individual, it's a responsibility of the whole Vad. And the Rebbe said, no, he wants to know exactly who it is. And the Rebbe said that the one that did it should right away resign from being a member of the Vadam Sader. That's how much it bothered the Rebbe that they did this. And actually that's what happened. The one that actually did it, now I don't know if it means the one that physically tied the chain or the one that it was his idea, I can't say exactly. But the one that was responsible, even though they all took responsibility, the Rebbe wanted he should resign, and right away he resigned, and from then on he was not anymore a member of the Vadam Sader. Now here we see how much the Rebbe cared about the Kovod of Rav Yolis, which probably many reasons for it, for whoever he was, his own greatness or whatever it is. But I think another thing is, because the kiruv that the Rebbe was makarev him was because the Friedrich Rebbe was makarev him, and the Friedrich Rebbe was machabed him. So by the Rebbe, the Kovod of Rav Yolis also connected to the Kovod of the Friedrich Rebbe. Maybe we could say that. And therefore, it bothered the Rebbe very much that they did something that he was very offended, that they tied his chair b'shal shalosh shabazel, and the Rebbe went so far that he even said that the one that did it, or the one that's responsible for it, should resign. And that's what happened, because seemingly, maybe it's because this is connected to the cover of the Friedrich Rebbe. My Zayde, my father's father, his name was Rebbe Leibel Shapiro, lived with us in Cleveland. And he passed away on Erev Yom Kippur in the year Tovshin Tez Zayin. And they buried him in a cemetery in Cleveland on Erev Yom Kippur. My father used to have a minhag to go to the Rebbe 3 times a year from Cleveland. It was for Simchas Torah, for Yud Shvat, and for Yud Beis Tammuz. But that year, he decided not to go. Also, my uncle, Levitch Olav Shalom, decided also not to go, because they felt if they go, they have to tell the Rebbe that their father passed away, and they didn't want to do that. That was the way they felt those years, not to tell the Rebbe things like that. But when it came later, Yud Shvat, they went to the Rebbe. So when my father went into Yechidus, he told the Rebbe that his father passed away on Erev Yom Kippur. And the Rebbe was surprised. Why didn't you let me know right away? In other words, the Rebbe wanted to know this. Probably it's negated to the Aliyas Neshama, that if the Rebbe knows about it, it's a very important thing for the Neshama. Anyway, but the way people looked at things those days were a little bit different. Also, my father and my uncle speculated that maybe if they would have told the Rebbe right on Erev Yom Kippur, right in the morning, maybe the Rebbe would have told him to wait and bring him to bury him in New York, not far from the Eil. We don't know exactly. This is some speculation thinking. But Lepel, that's what the Rebbe said. He was surprised. Why didn't you let me know before? Later on, when it came to put up the Matzeva, because those days people were not so careful to put up the Matzeva right away, so they put it up later. So they wrote the Rebbe the Nusach of the Matzeva. So my father wrote the whole Nusach and asked the Rebbe if the Nusach is good. So the Rebbe answered that Benegei the Nusach Bichlal Nochinhu, Bichlal it's okay, Elish Etzorechiyun, but we have to think about it. Ulai Kedai Lahachlif Haloshen Erev Yom Kippur Beloshen Erev Yom HaKodesh. Maybe it's worthwhile to change when it says that the day he passed away, to change it, not to write that he passed away Erev Yom Kippur, but to write that he passed away Erev Yom HaKodesh. And the Rebbe writes, Kivin Shezeu Simen Tev Yosef, because this is a better siman. And he says, Ayin Ksubes, Daf Kuv Gimel Amud Beis. Look in the Gemara Ksubes, Daf Kuv Gimel Amud Beis. There the Gemara uses a loshon that if someone is mes be'erev Yom Kippur, someone passes away on Erev Yom Kippur, simen rale, it's a bad simen. So therefore, not to write that you passed away Erev Yom Kippur. And the reason why it's a bad simen because you didn't make it that Hashem should forgive you for the Averis. So Erev Yom Kippur means it's before Yom Kippur. But if you write Erev Yom HaKodesh, I'm saying Chura the Pshat, Erev Yom HaKodesh Farkert, it means it's a day before a holy day, so it's a good day. And it's interesting that in this letter, the Rebbe doesn't write what the Gemara says, Simerale, the Rebbe just writes that Erev Yom HaKodesh is a better siman than Erev Yom Kippur. The Rebbe didn't even want to write the word that this is a Simera, as the Rebbe always behaved. He never would say negative words, even though the Gemara here uses that word, but here where it's not important to use that word, the Rebbe just said that Erev Yom HaKodesh is a better siman than Erev Yom Kippur. And this letter later was printed in the Igris, and this is Chelik Yud Gimel, page Nun Zayin, that this letter is printed. And I even think that in one of the Yechidus, I'm not sure, I think the Rebbe mentioned this to my father also, that Erev Yom HaKodesh is better to write than Erev Yom Kippur. The Likutei Sichos Chelik Yud, page 81, Ha'ara 9 at the end, the Rebbe mentions what it says in the Gemara Beye, Lovu alai v'anipareya, which means that if a person doesn't have money to buy special food for Shabbos, he should borrow, alai dei b'shesramai cheshbon, and I will pay. And then the Rebbe says, Ure'ei Eir Teira la Rav Magid b'Sefer, and look up the Sefer Eir Teira, written by the Teira of the Mizritcher Magid at the end. And then it says in brackets these words, so too, that's how it's supposed to say in the Rishimas Dvorim, which means in the Hanoche of the Farbrengen of Shabbos Pashas Breisish Tovshin Lamed Gimel, Shezehu Teiras Harav Magid, that this is Teira of the Magid, and then it says in parentheses V'leila Habal Shem Tev, it's not the Baal Shem Tev. So people ask, what is the meaning of this Ha'ara? So I want to say that by the Farbrengen of Shabbos Breisish, that year Tovshin Lamed Gimel, that's the year that this Sicha that's printed in Likutei Sichos here, Chelik Yud, for Parsha Toldos, that's the year the Sicha came out. But that year, Shabbos Pashas Breishis, the Rebbe mentioned this Torah concerning the Posek Lova Alai, but the Rebbe said that this is a Torah of the Baal Shem Tev. So when the Rebbe was Magia this Sicha for Parshas Toldos, and he mentioned this Wort, which is of the Magid, so the Rebbe added that this is how it's supposed to say also in the Hanoche from the Farbrengen of Shabbos Pashas Breishis Tovshin Lamed Gimel, that it's a Torah of the Magid, and you underline the word Rav Magid and not the Baal Shem Tev, because the way he said it said it was from the Baal Shem Tev. So he said that he's supposed to fix it over there, and it's supposed to say that this is a Torah of the Magid. So the Rebbe used the opportunity here in this Hanoch, in this Sicha that the Rebbe was Magia for Shabbos Pashas Toldos Tovshin Lamed Gimel, the likud for that week, took the opportunity to mention that what he said in the Farbrengen of Shabbos Pashas Breishis a few weeks before, it's supposed to be that this is a Torah of the Magid, not of the Baal Shem Tev. The Peil, that Hanoch of that Farbrengen hadn't come out yet when this Rebbe was Magia the Sicha, this likud for Parsha Toldos. So when it came to give out that Hanoch, there was a Shaila. How should we write it there? Should we write over there Lechatchila, this is a Torah of the Magid? But then no one will understand this Ha'ara here. No one understand what does it mean Chen Tzarech Liyas over there that this is Torah of the Magid. Should we write that this is Torah of the Baal Shem Tev, and then on the bottom of Ha'ara write that the Rebbe later said that this is really a Torah, write the Baal Shem Tev and write on the bottom it's a Torah of the Magid? We don't know if that's what the Rebbe wanted. The bottom line, we decided that we're going to write l'chatchila, this is a Torah of the Maggid, as the Rebbe says here to fix. People will not understand exactly what the Rebbe means here, so I'm explaining it now, that this was written because by the Fabrengen, the Rebbe said it's the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, so the Rebbe wrote here that it has to be, in that Hanoch, is supposed to say that this is a Torah of the Maggid. One of the secretaries in Merkaz that used to sit in the office was Rabbi Quint. He originally wasn't a Lubavitcher. Chal wasn't a Chassid. He was a Talmud Chacham. He wrote a Sefer, Menuchas Eliyahu. His name was Eliyahu Quint. So when his wife passed away and her name was Menucha, he wrote a Sefer and he called it Menuchas Eliyahu. And he was one of the secretaries in Merkaz from the time of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the early times of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And when the Rebbe would want that his letters should be signed by the maskir, because we know by the Frierdiker Rebbe and by the Rebbe, some letters he signed himself, and some letters it would say B'Shem Kveit Kedushas Admor Shlita, in the name of the Rebbe, signed by the maskir. So many times the signature that was there was Aleph Quint. He used to sign the letters that the Rebbe would send in the name of the Rebbe, but he was one of the maskirim there in Merkaz. Also, when the Bochrim went to Merkaz Shlichus, we used to deal with him. He used to give us the money, he used to tell us what to do, dealt with him. He told me once, when we're going to Merkaz Shlichus, we know we took along Svarim, we took along mezuzahs. So, Be'etzem, if people need a mezuzah, you could give a mezuzah for free. So he told me that the Frierdiker Rebbe told him not to give a mezuzah for free. And he said why? Because if you give something for free, it's not important to the person, and he will not be machshiv it, he will not hold it. He even told me he himself saw they once gave somebody a mezuzah in Merkaz. A guy came in and they gave him a mezuzah to hold, and he watched through the window and he saw how the person walked out and threw the mezuzah into the bushes. He says you could see clearly, had he paid for it, whatever little bit he would have paid for it, he wouldn't have done it and he would have kept it. So he said the Frierdiker Rebbe told him not to give out mezuzahs for free, but to charge a little bit, to charge very little. But if the person knows he paid for it, then it means something and it'll be choshev for him. It's similar to what we know that the Frierdiker Rebbe also said that for the talks and tales, you should charge a minimum amount, but charge so it'll be choshev by the people. But this is something that we know about. I think it's written in a letter. But this he told me that the Frierdiker Rebbe had told him. In year Tovshin Chov Hei, the year that the Rebbe was in Avelis after his mother, he would daven for Dom, had all the tefillas, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. And he would daven in the Bochrum's Minyan. Shachris was 9:30 in the morning, Mincha was 3:15, and Ma'ariv, winter time was 6:45, and summertime was 9:30. And the Rebbe davened for Dom in this Minyan, in the Bochrum's Minyan, to fit to the Seder HaYeshiva, because davening was 9:30 and Seder Nigla started 11, so the davening and then was breakfast, and this was the time of davening that the Rebbe davened for the Amid. He always used to come on time and start on time and finish whatever it took the Rebbe to finish. One day I remember the Rebbe came late, about 10-15 minutes late. Whatever reason, the Rebbe came late that morning. So I remember when the Rebbe davened for the Amid, he davened faster than usual. So when he finished davening, it wasn't very much later than he would finish every day. And we understood that the reason was because if he would daven the regular speed, he would finish later. That means that breakfast would start much later. B'meila, Seder Nigla would start much later. And the Rebbe didn't want, that's what it seemed like, that it should be mevalvel. His davening should be mevalvel, should set it mevalvel the Seder of learning of the yeshiva. That's why he davened faster, so it'll finish more or less the same time. And we knew that because we knew that the Rebbe, when he davened, he usually davened with the Bochrum's Minyan. If ever came out that he had to daven different time, he wouldn't make the Minyan in the shul. They would make a Minyan for the Rebbe next to his room, the Gadeit Natachten next to the Rebbe's Zichronos room, and then they would make a special Minyan not to confuse, mix up the Seder of the yeshiva. For instance, Bahab is when you fast, those that do fast after Pesach and after Sukkot is Monday, Thursday and Monday, Beis, Hey, Beis. So then, the Rebbe fasted Bahab, so then the Rebbe's Minyan davened as soon as you were able to break your fast, davened right after Seisach Yechovim. But it didn't fit to the Seder HaYeshiva. So they would make a Minyan for the Rebbe on Bahab next to the Rebbe's room. So the Rebbe would daven there, but not mix up the Seder of the Yeshiva with the Bochrim. And other times like that too, that if the Rebbe had to daven a different time than the Seder of the Yeshiva, then the Rebbe would daven next to his room. So we understood that the Rebbe B'chal tried not to mevalvel the Seder of the Yeshiva. They even say that the Rebbe said the reason why the weekday Fabrengens, like Yud Shvat, Yud started at 9:30, because the Seder Yeshiva went up to 9:30, so he didn't want to mevalvel the Seder. So we understood that the same thing here. Why did the Rebbe daven faster the day that he came late? So he should not be mevalvel. If he daven slow, the same speed as always, he would finish later, and breakfast would be later, and b'meila the Seder Nigla would stop later, and the Rebbe didn't want to change the Seder, take away time from the learning of the Bochrim. We know that the Rebbe wanted we should work on Hafotzas Chassidus, to teach Chassidus to everybody, and get as many people possible involved in learning Chassidus. And some places sometimes even would pay money in order for a person to come and learn Chassidus. But I want to say that we have to judge each case separately. It's not so poshet, because when we were in Cleveland, when my parents moved to Cleveland, we lived not far from Telz, and there were some bochrim of Telz that used to come to my father to learn Chassidus with him. Then when the yeshiva Telz moved to Wycliffe, which is about a half-hour ride from Cleveland, they would come from there, and they would take a taxi and come to my father's house to learn Chassidus. But then they came and they said that they have no money and you should pay for the taxi for them to come back and forth. And the truth is, some people utilize this, some of the Bochum utilize this to go when they're coming into the city. They would go to the bakery and do other things. They utilize the time also. And my father was thinking, is it right that they should pay them, that they should come to learn Chassidus, pay their taxi? It happened to one of the elder Chassidim, happened to be in our house in Cleveland. My father spoke to him about it and said he doesn't think that this is the right thing to do. And he said, no, he's not so sure, maybe you should pay. So he said, you know what, next time you go into Yechidus, ask the Rebbe. So next time he went to Yechidus, he told the Rebbe the whole story and asked the Rebbe. And this is the Lashon that the Rebbe said to him. Ziden is Chassidus gefallen azay niederig, amidaf zollen Geld auf lernen Chassidus. Did Chassidus fall so low that you have to pay money somebody to learn Chassidus? So here obviously the Rebbe felt you shouldn't. Now, it doesn't mean that that's a blanket statement, because we do know many times you pay for learning. Kelo Yungerman gets paid for learning, and there are other times when you pay for somebody to come to learn. So there is such a thing. It doesn't show that it's a bizoyen, it's an embarrassment for the Torah. So here also. So obviously, depends which case. But I want to say that this was a case that the Rebbe felt that this shows that Chassidus is gefallen niedrig, that Chassidus fell low, that you have to pay for it. So obviously, when it comes to do it, you got to look into each case to see, is it a case where it shows a degrading of Chassidus, or is it just a common practice that sometimes you pay for learning Torah? The second Sikha in Likud Sichas Chelik Yud Gimel Parshas Pinchas is taken from the Fabrengen Parshas Pinchas Tovshin Lamed Aleph. There the Rebbe talks about the Rashi, where Rashi says that when Moshe Rabbeinu told Hashem, before he passed away, that he should appoint somebody else to take his place as the leader of the Yidden, the Eibishter told him, instead of you telling me what I should do to my children, I want you to be mitzaveh the children, how they should behave towards me. He wants Moshe Rabbeinu to tell the Yidden how they should behave towards the Eibishter. And Rashi brings a moshel from a daughter of a king, a princess, etc., etc. And in the Sikha, the Rebbe explained why the Eibishter wanted that Moshe should be the one to be mitzaveh them, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader, so they will listen to him faster than they will listen to Hashem himself. Because Hashem, to the eyes of some, was not so important, because there were some people who did not listen to Hashem. So that's why Hashem wanted that Moshe Rabbeinu should be the one to say it. And the Rebbe is medayik. Why does Rashi say that he wanted him to be mitzaveh them? Because the word tzivui, instead of the word amira to say, he didn't say to Moshe, tell them how to behave to me, but he told him be mitzaveh. Tzaveh is loshen zirus. Zirus means very strict. So not only did the Eibishter tell Moshe, I want you to tell them how to behave towards me, I want you to be mitzaveh them, tzaveh's b'nei Yisrael, speak strict. And at this point, that he wanted Moshe to speak in a strict way, the Rebbe quoted from Tanya Sof Perek Chavtes, where it says L'gabe de Meraglim, that first the Yidden did not believe in the ability of Hashem, and then when Moshe Rabbeinu told them Hashem is angry, and they heard Dvorim Koshim, very harsh words, that made them change. So here too, the Eibishter wanted him to speak, Moshe should speak Loshen Tzivui, Zirus to the Yidden, and that will make them behave properly towards the Eibishter. And that's how the Sikha was written. This Dugma example of Tanya was written in the Sikha when it was given into the Rebbe as a Ha'oreh, because it's a side word, it's only a Raya, but it was written the way the Rebbe said it. After the Rebbe was Magiyah the Sikha, it seemed that the Raya from Tanya was not only Benegea the fact that the Eibishter wanted him to speak bezirus, to speak harsh words to the Yidden, and that'll help, but also the fact that the Eibishter wanted Dafka Moshe Rabbeinu to do it. And on that he brings the Raya from Tanya. So the people who prepared the Sikha as the Rebbe, L'chura from Tanya, is no dugma, no Raya, but the fact that it has to be Moshe Rabbeinu. There are 2 points here. The fact that the Eibishter wanted Moshe be the one to be Metzavid the Yidden, how to behave towards the Eibishter, and also that he should do it in a form of tzivui, which is zirus. So l'chura the raya from Tanya is only to the second part, that the fact that you speak b'loshen zirus, you speak harsh, it has an effect. But that there's no raya from there that connected to the fact that the Eibishter wanted Dafka Moshe Rabbeinu to do it. So they asked the Rebbe, the way the Rebbe was Magi, it seems that this is a raya also to the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu should do it. So the Rebbe answered these words: Ha'umnom l'daitom einaf kemine mihu ha'mezares. What do you think? That there is no difference who's the one that's going to be mezares, who's the one that's going to say it? In other words, when it says in Tanya that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to them harsh words, you think it's not negated that it was Moshe Rabbeinu? And then the Rebbe added, Ulishitosam, lo zirzam HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And according to you, that it makes no difference. Why didn't the Eibishter mezares them? You have to understand exactly the pshat of these words, but this is what the Rebbe wrote. And therefore, the fact that Tanya is an example to the fact that the Eibishter wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to do it is a good example. In other words, it's not only an example to the importance of speaking strongly, harshly, but it's also an example to the fact that the Eibishter wanted Moshe to do it. Because over there too by the Meraglim, it is important that Moshe did it. But then the Rebbe added, but nevertheless, you know what? In order for people not to make the mistake, not to go into a discussion, the Rebbe changed it and wrote it the way it's written now. That the way it's written now, in the Sikha, it says here, concerning Ka'orah 24, in the Pnim it says that the Eibishter wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to be the one, and then in parentheses it says it should be done in the form of zirus, in the form of harsh, and the Ha'orah, the Dugma of Tanya, is to that word that it's in the form of zirus. In other words, the Rebbe said, he changed it back that it should be that the dugma of Tanya should not be on the fact that it should be Moshe Rabbeinu, but it's only on the fact that it's a form of zirus. So the Rebbe was really saying, really it could have been the way it was before, that it's a dugma, a raya also that the Eibishter wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to say it, because over there too it was important that it was Moshe Rabbeinu. But Mehechatei, if it's going to be a problem, people won't understand Hefkashas, the Rebbe changed it this way, that it's a dugma to the inyan that it has to be B'loshen zirus. It happens sometimes that when you know a person very well, and then later you see his son who resembles him, sometimes you would call his son by the name of the father. And sometimes this happens unintentionally, just because he resembles the father, automatically the name of the father comes out. Sometimes people would do it intentionally, that because they were so close to the father, they intentionally would call the son by the father's name. This happened also by the Rebbe, in the Rebbe Leibel. The Rebbe Leibel told me that Tovshin Yud Beis, we know that that's when the Rebbe started giving the bracha to the Bochrim before Kol Nidrei. So what happened then was that it used to be that during the day of Erev Yom Kippur, when a group of Anash would form, they would go into the Rebbe for a bracha. Later on, another group would form, they would go in again for another bracha. Different people for a bracha. Then a third group would form, they got a bracha again. So Tovshin Yud Beis, it happened that 3 groups went in. In the third group, Rabbi Yoel was one of them. He was a bocher then. And when the Rebbe finished the bracha to the group, the Rebbe called him over and he said to him, Zog di bochrim as tell the bochrim that they could come in later. And he said that even those that were here by these regular bracha for Anash, they could come in later again. And when they came in, the Rebbe was already dressed with his kittel and wearing his talis, and he looked at every one of the bochrim, and then he covered his face and started giving the bracha. But he told me that when the Rebbe called him over, when he was standing there in the third group, and the Rebbe called him over to tell the bochrim to come in later, the Rebbe called him Fole. He called him by his father's name. Rabbi Yoel's father's name is Reb Fole. So the Rebbe called him Fole, and took him a moment till he realized who the Rebbe is referring to, and he walked over, and that's when the Rebbe told him to call the bochrim in. So here we see, I don't know the reason why he did it, whether it's intentionally or other kavanas, but this is what he said, the Rebbe said, that he called him by his father's name when he told him to tell the bochrim to come in. One of the older Rabbonim in Miami was Rabbi Stern. Shmuel Tuvia Stern. He was a big Talmud Chacham, and he had a relationship with the Rebbe, and he had a lot of correspondence with the Rebbe. The Rebbe wrote to him letters concerning very important matters. Negei the Shechuna of Crown Heights. The Rebbe wrote to him Benegei Miu Yehudi a long letter. The Rebbe wrote to him Benegei not giving back Shtochim a letter. The Rebbe wrote to him about the union of mikvahs, especially about the mikveh in Miami. All kinds of inyanim that the Rebbe wrote to him. But I want to tell over is something about a letter that the Rebbe wrote to him, dated Chof Aleph Tammuz, Tovshin Mem Beis. And the story behind it is that at that time there was some kind of politics here in Miami concerning Rabbi Stern, that some Rabbonim didn't agree with some of the things that he was doing and that he said. So in Mela there was all kinds of politics. At that time, we made a Kinus Torah here where we invited Rabbonim to come and speak Divrei Torah, Chidush Torah. And I had a dilemma. I didn't know what to do. Other Rabbonim did not agree with Rabbi Stern, so if I would call Rabbi Stern, they probably would not come. And not to call him is a problem, so I didn't know. Anyway, the decision was, Sheva al Taisa Odiv, don't do anything. So I actually did not invite him. Not because I wanted to not invite him, but I thought that was the better of the two things, not to invite him. So L'Poel, I did not invite him. A while later, after that, not long after that, he calls me and he says, I would like you to come over to my house. I would like to show you something. So I came over to his house, and he takes out a letter from the Rebbe that he just got, dated, as I said, Chof Aleph Tammuz Tovshim Mem Beis, written to him. And the Rebbe writes a pretty big title, Harav Hagon, Vosik V'chosit Isherei Elikim, Tzanem Ol Safre, Rav Polim, V'chulu, Mhur, Shmuli, Tuvia, Sheyich Stern, Sholom Avrocha. This is what the Rebbe writes. Ma'asher ani kabolos michtav kveiterosem Yud Gimel Tammuz. I am acknowledging receiving your letter that you sent from the 13th day of Tammuz. And then he writes, Umuvon, it's understood, Asher nifleisi plio g'doilo, that I wondered, a great wonder. And then the Rebbe with his Ksaviyat Kedesh writes, Vitzar, and pain that I had, al teichana michtov, on the contents of the letter that you wrote. And he told me what he wrote. He wrote to the Rebbe complaining why I didn't invite him to the Kinus Torah. So the Rebbe continues and writes, For sure, there was some kind of mix-up here and some kind of misunderstanding, etc. V'tikvosi, the Rebbe writes, I hope, that by the time you receive this letter of mine, the inyonim already straightened out. And then the Rebbe writes, this is also the inyan of these days of the 3 weeks, that their purpose is kiruv, closeness, and avas Yisrael, till love for no reason. In order to levatel the reason for the golis, and these days should be changed over very, very soon, to happy days and yomim tevim. And then the letter continues typed to cover the Vivrocha, and the Rebbe adds with his Ksaviyat Kedesh, Lahatzlocha ba'avidose hagdesho, and the Rebbe's signature. So here the Rebbe writes clearly that he was not happy with the fact that he was not invited, and the Rebbe writes that he had tsar. He wrote the word tsar with his handwriting. So obviously I apologized to him, and I said I didn't mean anything. And then from then on, our yachas continued very good. The truth is, our yachas was very good the whole time. But just at that little period, this was this problem. And after the Rebbe wrote this letter that he has tsar for this inyan that happened, that he wrote, and for sure he says there was some kind of mix-up, and ihavana, there was some kind of misunderstanding, v'chulu. So obviously from then on, our yachas became even better. And from then on, whenever we had anything, we invited him, etc., etc. In Tovshin Yud Zayin, which is 1957, Rebbe Shmuel Vitna was sick and he was in the hospital. And then the Rebbe came to be mevaker chayla him. The Rebbe went to the hospital, spoke to him for a while, and then the Rebbe went back. 10 years later, which is Tovshin Zayin, he was sick again. That time the Rebbe didn't come to be mevaker chayla him, but what the Rebbe did was he sent him a page, which is a maimer of the Tzemach Tzedek concerning the union of Refuah. And on that page, the Rebbe himself wrote, B'Ksaviyat Kedesh, wrote a whole ha'oreh concerning the union of Refuah. And we all saw it at that time. We saw that page. People even had a copy of it. I also had a copy of it. I can't find it at this moment to see exactly what it says there. I don't know exactly if and where that ha'oreh was printed, But at that time it was Mefursim. We all saw the page that the Rebbe sent to Reb Shmuel, which is a form like of Bikur Chelim through sending him a Maimer, and the Rebbe's Ksav Yad of a Heore in the Union of Refuah al Chassidus. During the years that the yeshivas in Miami, we had a lot of Rabbanim, Rosh Yeshivas, Gdei Yisrael come and visit the yeshiva. Some of them even gave a shir in yeshiva, spoke to the Bochrim, etc., etc. One of the people who came once and gave a shir in yeshiva was Harav Ruderman, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Ner Yisrael in Baltimore. And he gave a shir on Masechta Pesachim. But then at the end, he said to the Bochrim, he told everyone that he was in Lubavitch. His father took him to the Rebbe Rashab in Lubavitch. And he came there for the year Tov Reish Ayin Beis for Rosh Hashanah. He says he was young then, a child. He says he even remembers the Dibur HaMaschal of the Maimer. And the Maimer started with the words Yontif Shel Rosh Hashanah Shechol Yez B'Shabbos. Doesn't remember the Maimer, but he remembers the Dibur HaMaschal of the Maimer. And then he went into Yechidus to the Rebbe Rashab with his father. And he said the Rebbe Rashab gave him a bracha. And the bracha was, Zos wachsen in Teire und in Yira Shamayim. And he said to the Bochrim, and since the Rebbe gave me that bracha, I am also giving you that same bracha. And he gave the Bochrim the bracha, Ihr sollt wachsen in Teire und Yira Shamayim. We know that to the Rebbe's Fabrengens, a lot of people who were not Lubavitcher would also come, certainly to the weekday Fabrengens and to Akofes, and this included Chassidische Yidden and Litvische Yidden, people who are frum, people who are not frum yet, etc., etc. But the Rebbe would not make any note of somebody who he is. I mean, there were thousands of people that no one knew who he was, and nevertheless, the Rebbe didn't make a note to say who is this person. But I remember once by Akofes, this was in the Chofs, that there was a bocher, you could see it was a bocher, that was dancing amongst the crowd by Akofis. So I remember seeing that the Rebbe turned around to Rabbi Chadakov, and the Rebbe said something, and what it was is he asked to find out who this bocher is, which was strange. But the pale Rabbi Chadakov found out, and that they found out that this bocher was a goy, he was not Jewish. So Bichlal, even though the Rebbe did not point out that anybody tried to find out who he is, when they gave this bocher, the Rebbe did, and we found out that he was not Jewish. That the Rebbe didn't say to do anything, but nevertheless, the Rebbe made a point of finding out who he is, because obviously he saw whatever, that he's not Jewish, etc., and he wanted to know what he's doing there. We know that in the year Tovshin Chof Tes and Tovshin Lamed, going into Tovshin Lamed Aleph, the Rebbe spoke every Fabrengen and another piece of Igeres HaTshuva. Igeres HaTshuva is the third chelik of Tanya, and the Rebbe spoke every Fabrengen, Kimat every Fabrengen, during that time on the piece of Igeres HaTshuva. It all started Chof of Tovshin Chof Ches. The Rebbe explained the piece of Igeres HaTshuva. He explained the Lashon of the first Perek of Igeres HaTshuva, where it says Mitzvahs HaTshuva min HaTorah. So the Alter Rebbe refers to Tshuva as a mitzvah, and the Alter Rebbe goes according to the sheet of the Rambam. So the Rebbe explained by Ariches that according to the Alter Rebbe, the Rambam holds that doing Tshuva is a mitzvah. It's one of the Taryag mitzvahs. And not like the Minchas Chinuch, he says that according to the Rambam, it's not a mitzvah, the mitzvah is only vidui. And not only that Fabrengen, but the next few Fabrengens, the Rebbe continued in this biur of the Lashon of Igeres HaTshuva Perek Aleph, Mitzvahs HaTshuva min HaTorah. Then, towards the end of the year, Tovshin Chof Ches, and the beginning of Tovshin Lamed, the Rebbe said that they should print Igeres HaTshuva in a separate kuntris. They should print Igeres HaTshuva in a separate pamphlet and give it out separately. And the Rebbe said that they should print it in the regular form, the regular size, the way the Tanya is, and also in pocket size. So 2 Heitzoes came out with the blue cover, with the name on the cover, Lakute Amorim Tanya Cherek Shlishi Anika B'Shem Igeres HaTshuva. One was the regular size of Tanya, and one was pocket size, the same thing. And in the Hagdomas of the Meitzi Le'er, it says, the Lashon, Al pi heiros kvet lushad mushli te matfisim an bezeh befot stat metanya hitzos kost lekute amorim chedek shlishi anikre b'shem Igeres HaTshuva asher lekvet lushad marazok that were printing Igeres HaTshuva. And at the end they also added the Luach HaTikun Hagos of the Tzemach Tzedek and certain biurim of the Rebbe in Igeres HaTshuva, those that were available then in print from different letters that the Rebbe wrote. And the Rebbe kocht sich a lot that year, in that year, the year after, in Igeres HaTshuva. And this pamphlet was very important to the Rebbe. The Rebbe would hold it in a siddur. And from time to time, we would see that by davening, the Rebbe would look into that pamphlet. I remember once, during that year, the Rebbe came late from the oil, and he davened mincha late, and he wanted to daven Ma'ariv right away, but then he still would make a hefsek between mincha and Ma'ariv, so it shouldn't go straight one after another. So the Rebbe didn't leave the shul, he stayed by Stender and waited a few minutes. But while he was waiting a few minutes till they started Ma'ariv, the Rebbe took out this pamphlet of Igeres HaTshuva and was looking at this pamphlet of Igeres HaTshuva. And from the beginning of Tovshin Chof Tes, every Farbrengen, the Rebbe explained another piece of Igeres HaTshuva. He went with a seder of Igeres HaTshuva. Mamish, like a person who's giving a shir in a sefer, and he goes page by page, so to speak, and every Farbrengen he explained another part, and then another part, the next part of Igeres HaTshuva. And this went on all the way till Tovshin Lamed, the end of Tovshin Lamed, which was Parshas Dvorim. The Rebbe continued throughout the whole Igeres HaTshuva till finally explained the last piece of Igeres HaTshuva. Then Chof Ov started another part. Chof Ov Tovshin Lamed, the Rebbe started explaining every Farbrengen another piece of his father's Biyurim and Lekutei Levi Yitzchok of Igeres HaTshuva. Because we have Lekutei Levi Yitzchok on Tanya, so a little bit there is also on Igeres HaTshuva. So the Rebbe went piece by piece for the next Farbrengens Biyurim on Lekutei Levi Yitzchok of what he says on Igeres HaTshuva. Then, a lot of these siches that the Rebbe said on Igeres HaTshuva were written up and given into the Rebbe to be Magia. Now, some the Rebbe was Magia, some the Rebbe was not Magia, but those that the Rebbe was Magia came out in pamphlets. The first pamphlet had a cover on it saying Biyurim Igeres HaTshuva from the Rebbe, and it was not really regular print, but it was photostat of typing, and there was one pamphlet, and it finished by page 14. Then when continued, the next pamphlet started with page 15 as a hemshech to the pamphlet before. Then it came to a third pamphlet that all these siches that were mugi by the Rebbe came out in these pamphlets. Later on, this was printed in the Biyurim of Tanya, the Lekutei Biyurim of Rebbe Shia Korf. These were printed, and the details to that I will explain in the next broadcast. In Lekutei Siches, Chelik Yud Gimel, page 105, there is a Ha'ara 9. The Ha'ara has a whole inyan, and at the end of the Ha'ara it says, Avol Re'ei Sichas Parshas Mates Umasei Tovshin Lamed Gimel. But look in the Sicha of Parshas Mates Umasei Tovshin Lamed Gimel. When it says Avol, but means different than what it said before. In other words, what he's saying in the last line is that after he says the whole inyan in this Ha'ara, he says, but look in the Sikh of Parshas Mates Umasei Tovshin Lamed Gimel, you will see different than what it says here. So I want to explain the background behind these words, the last line of this Ha'ara. This Sikh that's printed here in Lekutei Siches Chelik Yud Gimel came out for Shabbos Parshas Mates Umasei Tovshin Lamed Gimel. It's a Sikh that the Rebbe said, Parshas Mates Umasei Tovshin Chovov. And there the Sikh, the Rebbe explains the posuk where it says at the end of the Parsha in Mates concerning the Dinim and Medorim, the posuk says, Eila hachukim asher tziva Hashem es Moshe ben ish leishte ben ov lebite ben reo beisavia. Which means these are the chukim that Hashem commanded Moshe Rabbeinu concerning between husband and wife and father and daughter. This refers to all the dinim that the Torah said in the earlier psukim that the father could nullify the neder of his daughter, and the husband can nullify the neder of his wife. So here the Torah makes a sum total and says these are the laws, the chukim that Hashem commanded between husband and wife and father and daughter. And the question the Rebbe asked, why in this sachakal at the end of the parsha, why doesn't the Torah also mention the mere fact that you have to keep a neder? Because part of what the Torah said earlier is that when you make a neder, you have to keep it. So the Torah should have said these are the laws of a neder, that you have to keep what you said, and the laws between husband and wife and father and daughter. And the Rebbe explained, because the Torah uses the word chukim, that he's only making a sum total of the chukim. Chukah is a mitzvah that has no rational reason. So the mitzvah that you have to keep your neder is not a chukah. There's a rational reason for it. When you say something, you got to keep your word. But the halachas between father and daughter and husband and wife, that is chukah. And that's why when he talks about the chukim, he only mentions these two. When the Rebbe said this, we were wondering, because Lepel Mamesh, even the fact that a father could nullify the neder of his daughter and the husband neder of his wife is also understood. Since the wife is under the reshus of her husband and the daughter is under the reshus of her father, makes sense that when she makes a neder, it's up to the father to decide if he wants the neder or not. It's almost as if when she makes the neder, it's on condition that the husband or the father will agree. And actually, the Klei Yakar says that, even though his pirush is not al derech hapshat, but this is a word that fits in derech hapshat. So we assumed then, Bashaz the Rebbe said the Fabringe, that probably what the Rebbe meant was not the mere fact that a father could nullify the neder of his daughter and the husband the neder of his wife. That's not the chukah. The chukah are the details. The details are that, for instance, they could only nullify it if they do it on the day they heard it. There's no rational reason for that. Also, the lotion they have to use, there's a different lotion the father uses and a different lotion the husband uses. Those have no rational reason. Probably that's what the Rebbe meant, that these are chukim because of these details, but not because of the general din. So when we prepared the Sikha for Shabbos Parshas Matis Maseh Tovshin Lamed Gimel, we wrote this word that we understood the Rebbe meant. That when he says that this is a chukah by nishli ishte ben avlebite, he meant the details of it. And that's what we wrote. We wrote it in ha'ora because it's not something that's directly negeya. So it went into ha'ora. And the Rebbe was magia the sicha, and that's how it said there. Came Shabbos Parshas Matis Maseh by the Fabrengen, Tov Shelamed Gimel. The Rebbe referred to this ha'ora, and the Rebbe said that how could you say that? B'chlal, a lot of mishpotim, mitzvahs which are in the category of mishpotim, means that the general mitzvah has a reason. But the details, lav dafkin, not necessarily have a reason. And he gave an example. For instance, one of the mishpotim, which is in Parshas Mishpotim, is that if an ox kills an eved, the owner of the ox has to pay the owner of the eved 30 shkolim. And this is one of the mishpotim. Why? Because it makes sense that if your ox killed an eved, you are responsible to pay. And it's in Parshas Mishpotim, it's part of the mishpotim. Even though why dafke 30 shkolim, that detail has no reason. A reason that we understand. It doesn't have a reason we understand. It doesn't change it and turn it into a chukah. It's still considered mishpotim. So too here, the Rebbe said, if the general idea that a father is able to nullify the neder of his daughter and the husband neder of his wife is understood and it's not a chukah, because the details in it are not understood, doesn't turn it into chukah. So it doesn't fit, the Rebbe says, what it says in this ha'ora, that the details, because the details are not rational, therefore the mitzvah is called a chukah. And therefore the Rebbe said differently, a different beer, and said that this is not so. Now, the interesting thing is that by the Fabrengen, when the Rebbe said this, the Rebbe added and he said, I'm waiting for 7 years for somebody to ask this question. Because the Sikha was said in Tovshin Chavov, and this is Tovshin Lamed Gimel. I'm waiting 7 years why nobody asked this question that I'm asking now on what was said then. The interesting thing is the Rebbe never said this then. It was only self-understood that this is what he meant. So we see here how much the Rebbe wanted Mizrach Kochen in the Sikhas, that not only what he actually outright said, we should look into it and try to understand, and if not, to ask the questions. Even the things that he did not say outright, but it's obvious that this is included in what he said. He also wanted you should understand that, and korzach in that, and if you have a question on that, you should ask. We know that many times by the Fabrengen, after a Sikha, the Rebbe would say, Ten lachocham ayech kameid, meaning, if you give an idea to a chocham, he could go further and understand it even more than what he was told. So you should understand even more. So here we see that Rebbe complained that 7 years since I said the Sikha, and no one asked, even though he never said this, but this was included in what he said. The Lepel after Shabbos, the next Likud was added a line that's supposed to add to this ha'ora here. The ha'ora stayed. The Rebbe was magia the sicha before Shabbos Parshas Matis Maseh Tovshin Lamed Gimel, and he left this ha'ora. But Shabbos he asked the kasha. So afterward they added that there should be a new line written here. Avol re'ei. Look at the Sikha from Parshas Matis Maseh Tovshin Lamed Gimel differently. And the Rebbe allowed it to be written. He was magia that, and it's written, and that's how it stayed. And when the Sefer was printed, the ha'ora is there with this word that it's called a chukah because the details are not understood. And then it says it then, but look at the Sikha of Parshas Matis Maseh Tovshin Lamed Gimel, you see differently. So now we have to learn. If the Rebbe asked this kasha, in other words, he said this is not so, then he should have not left this ha'ora. He should have crossed it out. He left the Ha'ara. Obviously, there's a mokim for this also. And then he said he left the Avol Re'ei, look in Matas Masa Tov Shin Lamed Gimel to say it's different. So we have to look into this to see why the kasha is not such a real strong kasha. That's why he left it. But on the other hand, that is a kasha. This is something for everybody to learn.